Shalom Aleichem, everybody. We're up to Avodah Zarah Daf Tezvav today. Daf Tezvav is the 15th blot. I'll tell you the truth. In just a couple of days, we are done with the first parak. That's how fast it goes. That's how fast Daf Yomi goes. It goes. The Daf never sleeps. So we are going to start from the two dots, even though on Shabbos we started a little bit from the two dots already. But let's start from the two dots. It's a new sugya. Tezvav Amid Aleph. Very simple, 5 lines from the top, 6 lines from the top. Okay? It said in the Mishnah, Ubechol makoim ein moichrin behema gasa. You're not allowed to sell to a goy a behema gasa. How do you translate behema gasa, doctor, over there? A behema gasa is an ox, a bull. How do you, gasa means a gas.
Domesticated.
No, not domesticated, no.
Oh, no, not a
What?
Gasa.
Gasa, how do you, I guess that's the, gasa, that's the translation. Okay, bullish, okay. Here we go. So the Gemara says, yeah, 6 lines on the top, Tezvav Amid Aleph. Large livestock. Okay, so you're not allowed to sell large livestock to a non-Jew. My timer, why aren't you allowed to sell a bull, an ox, to a goy? Says the Gemara, Nehi, it's true, we're not afraid that maybe they're going to use it for their own inappropriate, indecent pleasure. Revia. How do you translate revia? Sodomize it? Yeah?
Something, no.
Whatever.
Relationship. Relationship.
Bestiality. Thank you. Okay.
Bestiality, huh?
Yeah. So we're not afraid that the guy is going to do that with the animal. By the way, why not? Kabar said earlier, because if he buys it... No, because if he buys it, he's protect. If it's somebody else's animal, he doesn't mind. He might do it. If it's his own, he takes care of it. He doesn't want to get involved in that stuff.
You know why? Because if he does it, it's not gonna have any children.
Oh, that's what happens? Aha. Okay, so there you go. He ruins it. Okay, so he doesn't want to ruin it for himself.
If you take it from a Yid, he doesn't care.
Somebody else doesn't care.
If you take it from a Yid, he's gonna do it in Dafka.
Aha. So the Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason why you can't sell a behema gasa and hidl reveal a chashinon? The Gemara says it's true that we're not suspicious that he might do bestiality. We're afraid that he's going to do melacha with this animal. What's the problem if the guy does melacha? Yeah? Teretz is, he's going to do it on Shabbos. What's the problem if he does it on Shabbos? Because there's a mitzvah called shvisas behemtai, which means that I can't have my animal do work on Shabbos, even if it's not me doing the work, even if it's a guy. Even if the animal is given over to somebody else, belongs to me, melacha cannot be done on Shabbos. Oh, ask the Gemara, Mos Kashav and Yevid. Let him do it. Kima the Zavna Kanya, he sold it. By the way, biggest compliment, Mo, is to ask the Gemara's next question. That's good, which means you're on target. So it means he did it, he sold it, so why can't the guy use it to do melacha? Says the Gemara, Gzeira mishum she'ela or mishum schirus. There's a suspicion that if you allow the behema gasa to be used by an Ovid Kechavim that bought it from you, they're also afraid that even if you don't sell it to the Ovid Kechavim, if you just lend it or you rent it, they're going to also do malach on Shabbos, and that would be a problem of Shvisas Behemta because you still own it. Asks the Gemara, Shaila Kanya V'Agra Kanya, who cares? If you lend it, the guy is coin it, right? He's Chayiv and Oinsin. Right? You just learned a game, right? This year, right? Hamafkin. Right? His Shoyel is Chayiv and Oinsin, right? So if it's Chayiv and Oinsin, he's coin it. So schirus also, if you rent it, it's koinetz. Oh, says the Gemara. Elo Amram Breder Rav Yeva. So Ram Breder Rav Yeva says, you know why they assered a yid to sell behema gasa to a goy? Gzeira mishum nisyaynei. We're afraid you're going to take it for a test drive. What does that mean? The zimnan sometimes the zabna lani alei samach lishkicham al Shabbos. So like Rav Shola is saying, that sometimes the Jew is going to want to sell it to the guy right before Shabbos. He's still doing business. Usually we close shops by Chatzos. But this year, I guess he wants to catch on a deal, right? So right before Shkiz Zachama, the guy comes, I want to buy this. Can I take it for a test drive? For Omar Lei, and the guy says, look, yeah, Ton Nasyan Alei, come, let's go for a test drive together to see if a taka carries 100 pounds on its back. I want a chamor that can carry 100 pounds. And what happens? The behema is going to walk because it recognizes the voice of the Jew, right? When he talks to the kaina, when they negotiate. And because of his voice, the behemoth, the chamor, is going to start walking Dalet Amos B'Rishus Harabim on Shabbos, going to carry it. V'nichale the tezel, and the moicher, the Jew wants to show off his animal, right? He wants the animal to walk because now he could prove that this is worthy of buying. And there's a lav of mechamer after his behemoth on Shabbos, right? Which means you're not allowed to have your animal carry stuff in Rosh Hashanah and Dalet Amos if you're the one who triggers it with your kol. So here's what we're saying. It's unbelievable. Do not sell a behema gasa to a guy. You know why? Because sometimes the sale might happen Erev Shabbos, and on Erev Shabbos, right before Shkia Zachamo, and you're negotiating with the guy quickly, and as you're negotiating, the guy says, "Oh, let's check it out." It puts the packages on the back of the donkey, and hears the Jew's voice, and it's mechamer, and it starts mechamer, and then the Jew is over in Isser Shabbos. Right? That's the whole thing. So therefore, do not sell any behema gasas to a guy. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Good kasha. Yeah.
Why are you benefiting from borrowing?
Why are you benefiting? No borrowing. At this point, we're not saying it's anything about borrowing. We're just saying you can't sell it because if you're selling it, you might be selling it on Erev Shabbos, and if you're selling it on Erev Shabbos, guy might put the stuff on the donkey's back, and hears your voice, and your voice will trigger the animal, the donkey, to walk with packages, Dalet Amos Rabim, and that's called mechamer. That's allowed. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos.
Yeah, but it's Erev Shabbos, right? It's not Shabbos.
No, they're starting to talk Erev Shabbos.
And he can't sell it. So
I know, but it's irrelevant. But because he's allowed to sell it, that's why it started. The whole conversation.
He can't sell it anymore. So once Shabbos starts, he's not going to even sell it. So why would he test drive?
I know, but the conversation is.
So before Shabbos.
You're saying he's not going to sell it, but if you're allowed to.
On Shabbos.
Huh?
Because he might do it on Shabbos. He might come back to the guy might come back.
The sale's starting Erev Shabbos, right? The starting negotiations Erev Shabbos. So he's going to say, okay, I'll sell it to you after Shabbos because it's already Shabbos. But it'll be too late because the negotiations are happening by Shkia Zachama and the donkey is listening to his voice and he's walking.
Isn't the main problem just them negotiating on Shabbos?
Yes,
something
but the
else.
negotiations happens because you're allowed to sell. So Chacham saying don't sell.
That's something else.
No, but I'm saying that's the main problem. Why are we?
No,
focusing
There's
on
no
the
issue.
guys?
Yeah, that's something else. Yeah, negotiations is not an issa deraisa.
You can't negotiate with people on Shabbos.
It's not an issa deraisa though. Here we're talking about issa deraisa. We're just afraid for issa deraisa. Mechamer is issa deraisa.
Can you lease it before Shabbos?
Huh?
Can you lease it before?
So it sounds like only selling, leasing or renting. Is that included at this point? Because the Mishnah says you can't sell. Is according to this pshat, is leasing or renting included? It's a good kasha. It's not included. It's only limkar. Gemara says maskul of shibei Davidus chiras mikanya. The Gemara wants to challenge the assumption the Gemara made previously. The Gemara says that why would it be a problem if you rent it or you lend it to a non-Jew and then the non-Jew does malach on Shabbos? He was already koinet. It shouldn't be a problem with shvisas behema because the guy was koinet. The Gemara says really. Schiras, right? It's a very famous question all over Shas. Is the soicher, guy who rents an apartment for betikas chametz, all types of halachas. Who owns the apartment? Whose apartment is it? Is it the renter or is it the masker? Is the guy who rents it out? Vatanan asks the Gemara, I'll bring you a raya that by schiras, halacha is that the renter is not koinet. It's the guy who rents it out, still has it, he still owns it. Even when the Chachamim said you're allowed to rent an apartment to Avodah Zarah, they said you can never rent a space for a guy to live in. You can only rent for storage. Why? He's going to bring in stuff that's not allowed to be in that house. And if he brings it in, what's going to happen? You're over a lav of leisavi ta'eva el bisecha. It's allowed not to bring in Avodah Zarah. So if I rent a guy my apartment and the guy brings in Avodah Zarah, and the apartment is still mine because I'm the balabayas, I'm the owner, right? I'm the masker. So I'm over. If the guy brings it up, I'm over in a lab. So what do you see from here? Who owns it? The balabayas or the renter? So the Gemara says, I see from here the balabayas owns it, right? Because otherwise the balabayas isn't over a lab if the guy brings it up by the zara because the guy's kind of.
The renter is the current owner, though.
Renter is the current owner. So the renter doesn't own it because we're saying don't rent it to a guy. Because if you rent it to a guy, he's going to bring away the Zara into the house, and then you'll be over, the Jew who's renting it out will be over on V'loisavit Evel B'secha. If you talk about the Schiras Kanya, if you learn that Schiras is Kaina, which means that the renter, the guy who rents it is Kaina, who cares if you rent your apartment to a guy? Hi Kama'ayil, Ki Kama'ayil, when the guy is going to bring it up by the Zara, Lebesa Kama'ayil. right? He's bringing it into the guy's house himself because he's koined. The Jew shouldn't be held responsible for that. So must be, if the Jew is held responsible, that the soicher is not koined. It's the masker. The masker is always in possession of whatever he rents out, and that's why he would be over the lav. Says the Gemara, Shani Avodas Kechavim de Chamira. No, really, I'll tell you, the soicher is koined. Really, it's the guys. And the yid shouldn't be held accountable at all if the guy brings an Avodah Zarah. Because once I rent it to the guy, it belongs to the guy. So why don't we allow a Jew to rent an apartment to a guy? You know why? It says in the Torah, your house, and because Avodas Kechavim is such a harsh sin, it's one of the Gimel Chamuras, right? What are the Gimel Chamuras? What are the three cardinal sins? You have Gilui Arayos, Shlichus Damim, and Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is one of the harshest sins. You're not allowed to do Avodah Zarah, so therefore, even though the soicher owns the apartment, but if you're the Jew and you rented it out to him, with regard to Avodah Zarah, we're more chamer, we're more stringent, and we consider it as if it's still your house. That's why don't rent it out. Schiras Mikanya is really the soicher own the chayfetz that he rents, but Tanan have a raya, not like that. Yisroel shesochar pora mikoyin. Okay, we know the halachas of a kohen, right? What is a kohen allowed to eat that a Jew is not allowed to eat? Truma, right? And Trumas Meiser, right? There's even for the late Meiser Rishon, kohen gets also from that. So who's allowed to eat truma in a kohen's family? Only the kohen himself?
No.
Is his wife allowed to eat it?
Also his behema.
Behema is also allowed to eat it, right? Kinyan kaspoy. The Torah allows anything the kohen owns, it belongs to him. He's allowed to give truma to. What? A servant also. Yes. So the Gemara says, what happens if a kohen, right? Yisroel shesocher paramakan. A kohen rents out his animal to a Jew, right? Is the kohen allowed to feed the animal, his animal that he rented out, kashile truma? He's allowed to feed that. Says the Gemara of Atanan, it's a Mishnah Trumas. Yisrael, they rented a parah from a kohen. Yachileno karshine truma. He's allowed to feed him kernels of truma, even though he rented it to a Jew. And there's room to argue if he rented it to a Jew. Now the animal belongs to the Jew. An animal belongs to a Jew is not allowed to eat truma. Still, the kohen, who is the original owner, the guy who rents it out, is allowed to feed him truma, and vice versa also. The kohen shesochar parah Yisrael. A kohen that rents a parah from a Jew, now the kohen is the renter, even though the kohen has to feed it, he's not allowed to feed him truma. Why? Because who's the animal belong to? The yid. So he's talking about the schiras kani, but if you'll say schiras is kohen, amai lo yachileno. Yeah, why shouldn't the kohen allowed to feed this animal that he rented from a Jew truma? It's his now, paradi day. If you're telling me the soicher owns it.
They do that in Israel, zoos. That
what?
That has truma, you can't get it off of it.
Yeah.
So the zoos give over the animals to Kohanim sometimes.
No way.
They just give it.
Is that really true?
That's what I've heard.
That's brilliant. Chaim says that in Eretz Yisrael, kach shama. That's what Chaim says. That what do you do with the food of truma in Eretz Yisrael? I guess we separate truma from maestros. So what do? He says that they give the animals in the zoo, they sell it to Kohanim, and they feed the animals. Now the animals belong to a kohen. Now they feed the animals the trumas. That's what you're saying. Why can't the kohanim themselves eat it? I guess let's say it's not edible.
No one can eat so much stuff. It's so big.
It's a lot of the quantity.
Don't they switch it on?
I don't think you can pay that. I don't think you can pay that. No. I got an email once. I once said in a makas, we talked about this. Somebody emailed me and said it was a mistake, that you can't be paid the trumas so you have to get rid of it. You have to somehow get rid of it.
In Israeli Siddur, they have the nusach.
Ah, yeah?
They put it on the crest to use yamamel.
Aha. Yeah, in other words, you throw it out. You get rid of it. Destroy it. That's what it is. Yeah.
Or you can use it instead of throwing it away. That's
you use it in such a way that you just explained.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Gemara says, very simple question. If the kohen rents a parah from a Yisrael, why can't he feed it truma? If the renter owns it, let him feed us truma. Must be shma minol schiras loikanya. From here you see that schiras is not kohen. Because if it's kohen, if the renter really owns it, the kohen should be able to feed truma to the Jew's animal that he rented from the Jew, because now it's his. Teretz is, no. It still belongs to the masker. Now the Gemara says, now that we've established that schirus is not koina, now you can answer a simple answer. You know why you're not allowed to sell a behemoth gasa to a guy? Because we're afraid, even though when the guy buys it, the guy can work with it on Shabbos. It says behemoth. There's no isser for a Jew if he sells an animal to a guy for the guy to work it on Shabbos. Right? Shvisas behemoth is only for the Jew's animal. If he sells it, no problem. But where Gzeira, he might rent it out. And we just established that if you rent it, it still belongs to the person who rents it out, to the Jew. And if the guy works with it on Shabbos, there'll be a problem of Shvisas behemoth. Says the Gemara of Avodah Zarah, I did this afsira. Ravada had a loophole. He said he allowed to sell a chamor, a donkey, to a non-Jew through a middleman. Through a Jew who's a middleman. What do you call a middleman? A safsir. How do you call the middleman? A broker. That's the word. Broker. Thank you. Okay. Rabbi Artscroll. So the Gemara says, how Rav Ada said that if you use a broker, even if he's a Jew, then you're allowed to sell your animal, your chamor, to a guy through a broker.
If you know that
Why?
you're going to give it to a guy, how can you do that?
Oh, how could you do that? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because all of the suspicions we have when a Jew sells a chamor directly to a guy falls away when you use a middleman, a broker. How so? Gemara says, because if you're going to tell me that, what was the chashash? The chashash was that if you sell it on Erev Shabbos, then you're going to do a test it. You're going to put the load onto the animal, and it'll hear the owner's voice and recognize it, and then the animal will walk through the Jew's voice, and it'll be over on the chamer. Says, but here, if you're using a middleman, the donkey doesn't recognize the middleman's voice. There's no chashash. The donkey only moves when he hears the owner's voice. I guess there's some recognition there. So here, you remove that suspicion, so that's not a chashash anymore, because he doesn't recognize his voice, and he's not going to walk. There's not going to be no mechamer on there. And if you're going to tell me that if the middleman, the broker, sells it, the broker might also come to lend it or to rent it. Says there's also no chashash there. It doesn't belong to the broker. Broker's only a broker, right? He doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the rights to rent it out or to lend it. Also, if a guy is trying to sell something, he doesn't want you to use it. He doesn't want to lend it to you or rent it to you, right? He doesn't want you to kind of test drive it in such a way where, if he doesn't have to. So maybe there's no chashash. If using a middleman, that's mutter. So then maybe that's the heter to sell, because bitaka kasha, like today, I know that we're not selling, interesting, right? Like, I know it's not animals, but would this chashash apply today with a car? Can a guy sell a car to a non-Jew? If you're talking about it's a gzeira because of she'ela schirus, because you might lend it or you might rent it to a guy, and then when you do it, he's using your vehicle on Shabbos, doing malacha with your item, right? So maybe there's a chashash nowadays also, right? Is there a chashash nowadays also to sell it to a guy? I didn't look into it la halacha, but that could be a shaila, right? So Rav Ada is giving you a loophole. He's saying do it through a broker, and then there's no chashash. Says the Gemara, Ravuna sold a certain cow to a guy. Oh, he violated the Isser Chachamim, at Tekanas Chachamim in the Mishnah. Omer Rav Chizda. Chizda says, my time of Avad Marachi, how could you do that? You're not allowed to do that. It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, you're not allowed to sell a bein begasa to a guy. Omer Lei, Ravuna says, no. I have a heter. You know why? Eimer l'shchita zavna. I'm assuming that the guy is not going to work with it. He's going to shecht it because he bought it to eat. So the Gemara says, oh, whoa, 1 second. If the goy buys an animal from a Jew and he doesn't specify why he's buying it, so the Jew is allowed to sell it? Because the Jew could assume that it's for shechita and not for anything else? How do you know you could rely on such a kula when it comes to this Isser? The Gemara says that Tanan, I'll tell you from where. Beshame Oimrim, Beshame say, Mishnah and Shvius, La Yimker Adam Parai Chareshes B'Shvius. A Yid, let's say a Jew is Chashed ala Shvius, right? A Jew, let's say he works on Shemitah. He can't overcome the Nisayan of not working on Shemitah. So now you have this whole Karen HaShvius, right? Karen HaShvius basically tries to help Jews in Eretz Yisrael in the year of Shemitah, giving them money, whatever they're losing, to make sure that they're not going to work the land. The farmers. What if you have a farmer that, Karen Shvius is not working for him. He's like,
Gotta work.
yeah, huh? He
Gotta
wants.
work.
Yeah, I gotta work. I gotta earn a living. It's too scary. So you're not allowed to sell him a cow that plows. Why? Because because if he's suspicious of using this cow to violate it, Isser Shemitah and plow and Shemitah, you can't sell it to him. It's very interesting. Can you sell a phone to a Jew without a filter? It's like an interesting thing, right? You can't sell. You can't. Lifnei Iver, right? Can't sell. That's a big shaila. Here we're talking about: can you sell a cow to a Jew who's suspicious of using that cow to violate an Isser? Lifnei Iver, listen to Mishnah. You're not allowed to do it.
So every Jew comes into your store who's not Shomer Shabbos.
Right.
You have the
It's
same
on Shabbos.
question.
אבל
If I give you a cup of water, you might not make a
בכלל
bracha.
שבס, בכלל שאין בעיה, בכלל שבס הוא כמו גוי, זה לא משנה.
Or am I using a Shabbos? Okay, so
בכלל שבס זה כמו גוי. אז אתה יכול למכור לו כמו גוי. You can do ריבית, you can ask ריבית from בכלל שבס. כמו גוי, כמו גוי, חי, תסתכל שולחן ערוך. You can charge him ריבית. You can charge בכלל שבס ריבית, interest, כמו גוי. בכלל שבס זה כמו
It's not
גוי.
Reyecha, it's not Reyecha.
נו, אז מה אני אומר?
so
אז אתה יכול למכור לו גם, תמכור לו גם את הטלפון, מה? כמו גוי. תמכור לו את
if he's choshed, if a yid is,
הטלפון.
if a Jew is choshed, he's going to do an aveir with a device. You're not allowed to sell it to him.
בסדר, שיעשה תשובה קודם.
Lifnei Iver, let's hit the
You
mechshay.
don't know 100%.
Oh.
Think the questionability?
Besil matir. Besil is matter like Shmuel. Sheyachal sheichta. I could say, listen, he's buying it. I don't know for what purpose he's buying it for. Maybe he's buying it because he wants to shechter and eat it. I don't have to assume, even though you're a Jew who would use the para on Shemitah, but I don't have to assume that the para you're buying from me, you're going to use for Shemitah. You might shechter, you
Can I
might
sell
eat it.
you a treif piece of meat then?
If he's choshed at eating treif, and there's no other usage with that piece of meat other than eating it, then you can't sell it, even according to Basil Pashtas.
Even to Goyim you cannot say...
You can't benefit
No,
Goy is not
no,
mitzvah.
no,
No,
you
for
can.
business, for business.
You can. You just
can't
can't do
benefit
basar
from
v'challah
treif?
together.
No, for business.
You just can't do basar
You can
v'challah
benefit
together.
from
You cannot
treif.
have
You
a-
can
no,
like
it's
buy
a big
McDonald's.
misunderstanding.
for
It's only
treif.
basar v'challah.
No?
תסתכל ביורה דעה,
I think that
you cannot
can
have
give
a
it to your
business,
animals, treif.
of treif.
Eat your animals.
Yeah, what's the
Yeah,
treif?
just
It's
benefit.
the basar v'challah.
Feed your
No,
animals.
no, no, no,
You
no,
can't
no.
eat it.
You can do.
I
No.
was buying for my workers pizza,
No.
Okay.
and I told the rabbi, he says you can buy them the Domino's as long as it's not pepperoni. I said, why? What's the difference? He says you cannot give them basar v'challah.
Not something
Because you're not allowed to benefit from
You
basar
can,
v'challah.
you can give them not kosher meat,
ענה,
but you
but
keep
Wow.
them together.
אתה לא יכול לעשות
No,
business,
but what's the difference, right? You're
you
gonna.
cannot make a business with the treifus.
No, you can. You can't.
Oh,
do it with
treif
basar
is
v'challah.
also bano?
No,
Treif is
it's only
also
basar v'challah. It's only basar
Ah,
v'challah.
The treifus and the shkita.
No,
so
I'm
what
not
there?
buying pizza. Domino's like four for 20.
It's only
bucks.
basar v'challah.
It's 1 for 30.
Let me tell you something.
I know, but the pieces don't buy
Ah.
the.
No, I was buying for them. Like I
Uh-huh.
wanted to leave the job sites. I was buying them pizza, whatever. I'm bringing Domino's.
So what do you see from here? Gemara says they have a raya. Anytime, even if this Jew might be over an Aveira, or this guy might use the Behema Gasa in a way that will violate an Isser Torah, let's say Shvis's Behema, the halacha is if you can assume, there's room to assume that he'll use it b'derech heter, you're okay. Let's say with a Behema Gasa, he might shecht it. Here, with Shvius, the Parah and Shvis, he might shecht it. You can assume, you can rely on that. Omer Rabba, so Rabba says, mi dami? You can't compare it. You can't compare the case of Shemitah, of Lifnei Iver, to our case of Shvis's Behema on Shabbos. You know why? Hasam, eno the mitzvah Shvis Behema to B'Shvius. Over there, by Shemitah, there's no Isser Shvis's Behema on Shvius. There's Isser, there's a Shvisa Soda. You have to let your field
Leaf
rest.
out.
Yeah, but the Behema is not a problem. Behema can work on Shemitah. Just your field can't be worked on. So Mamela, the only Isser is Lifnei Iver. Right? Lifnei Iver, because this guy might work with this animal on Shemitah, your field, the field. That's the only Isser there. Hacha Adam Mitzvah Shvis B'Enta B'Shabbos. But over here, you're violating not just Lifnei Iver, you're violating Isser Shabbos of Shvis's Behema. So Rabbah is saying you can't bring proof from the Mishnah and Shavias just because Basil will allow you to assume that he's going to shecht it, because that is with regard to the Isser of Lifnei Iver. With regard to the Isser of Lifnei Iver, for some reason Lifnei Iver is not as chamer. If there's room to assume he's not going to be over it, he's going to shecht it and eat it, okay, you can rely on that. But with regard to an Isser Shabbos, no, you don't. You can't bring a raya from a lesser Isser where we allow you to assume the best in someone, that even a harsher Isser you can assume the best in somebody. Shvisas Behem on Shabbos is a harsher Isser. So that's Rabbi doesn't like the raya from Shemitah. Omele Abaye, so Abaye said, V'chal heicha de Adam Mitzuva Aser. V'arei Soda de Adam Mitzuva Shvisas Sedeyu B'Shvias. Right? I bring you raya from even Shvisa Sedeyu, not just Lifnei Iver. V'tanya, B'shama Omer Melim Kodem Zdenir B'Shvias. B'shama say you're not allowed to sell a soda that's plowed, a field that's plowed on Shemitah to another Jew that we suspect he's going to violate the Isser Shemitah. Why? Because Lifnei Iver L'Sif Mechshav. B'Sil Matirat Nishyochel Avira. And Basil say it's mutter because you don't have to assume he's going to plow it. It could be he's going to leave it barren. He's not going to plow it. So here the Yisrael would be over Isser Shvisas Nechasav. It's more than that, and still you're allowed to do it because you can assume the best in someone. Okay, that's the Gemara saying. The Gemara says so. Bottom line is that Rav Huna was correct in selling the parah to a non-Jew. Even the Mishnah says you're not allowed to. Over here, Rav Huna said, Eimer l'shchita zav, and I can assume the best in him. If there is room to assume that he's going to do a davar heter, then you're allowed to assume that. Maskol Ravashi v'chalaych denu b'tzav shari v'chari kelim denu b'tzav shvis kelim b'shvias utnan Evan keishon v'shal v'cham b'shvias amachreish v'chal kaleo elva misva deker. What do you mean? It says you're not allowed to sell any kelim that a person can plow with on Shemitah. You're not allowed to sell it. You're not allowed to sell it to a Jew who is suspicious of using it be'isser on Shemitah, right? And it says that even though it's only a lifnei iver diga halacha, still you're not allowed to sell it to him. So even lifnei iver, you can't assume the best in him. You have to be suspicious. Elo Ravashi kol echad ekel misla talinon ve'afal gav de mitzvah v'chol echad lekel misla loy talinon afal gav de einay mitzvah. You have to use your judgment. Anytime you have a good svara, right, a good assumption that you could assume he's not going to do it, he's not going to do the avera, then you could rely on that. But if it's not a good assumption, then you can't rely on it. So I'm assuming that when Rav Huna relied that the guy is going to shecht it, that was good enough. In other words, that was a logical assumption. But if a guy's buying kalim and the only usage of the kalim is that he's going to use it for machresha, he's going to use it to plow, then you have to obviously be choished that that's what he's going to use it for. You can't just turn a blind eye and pretend, no, maybe he's not going to use it. No, that you have to assume that. So Rabbi sold a donkey to Yisrael that was choshed limker levi kechavim. Wow, interesting. So in other words, he didn't sell it directly to a guy, he sold it to a Jew who was suspicious he's going to turn around and sell it to a non-Jew. Why'd you do it? Rabbi said, no, I sold it to a Jew. I didn't sell it to a non-Jew. But this Jew is going to go and sell it to Levi He's going to sell it to Levi Kechavim be'Isser. So you were machshalim, you caused them to violate an Isser. Yeah, which Isser? Lifnei Iver Pashtus. So the Gemara says, La'evet Kechavim k'mezabin, li'Yisrael loy k'mezabin. This Jew wants to sell it, right? He just wants to flip it. He wants to flip this donkey.
Doesn't care to who.
Doesn't care to who. He might sell it to a Jew. So here's another case where, yeah, it's logical to assume any kind of that's going to come along, he's going to sell it to. So it's not a problem. Esaveh says the Gemara. Nocha kashan rabba mokav shenahagu limkar behema daka lakusim moichrin shaloi limkar ein moichrin. Any place that the minig is to sell a behema daka to a kusi, you could sell, and shaloi limkar, and if the minig is not to sell to a kusi, then you don't sell. So the Gemara says, my timer. What's the reason? Why, when the minig is not to sell to a kusi, why can't you sell it? If you're going to tell me they are also nechshad on bestiality, so in other words, if you sell a behemah daka to a kusi, they might use it inappropriately, and you are complicit in that avera because they know that you're not allowed to do that. And michashidi, they taka choshed. The kusim are not choshed on that. You're not allowed to leave behemoths in the inn of avodas kechavim and avodah kechavim. Zecharim etzel zecharim. You can't leave male animals in next to a male non-Jew. When a nekevas etzel nekevas, or females next to females, zecharim nekevas zecharim, zecharim etzel nekevas, and of course you can't leave zecharim by nekevas and nekevas by zecharim. Ein moiser be'em l'roish land. You can't give it over to their shepherd. Why? Because chashudim on what? On bestiality. Ve'ein b'siyachden emoem. And you cannot be misyachid with goyim because they're chashan shvichas damim. They might kill you. Ve'ein moiser lan tinuk lam sefer. You can't give them a child to teach anything lam de umnis, even a profession. Why? Either because mishkav zachar, they might violate the child, or they might teach him the wrong things.
Not going to school.
Aval. Okay. Aval, mamid be'em shakusim. But that's only for non-Jews. But for kusim, we're not afraid of that. Zechorim, eitzel nekevis. You can put zechorim, eitzel nekevis, eitzel zechorim. Ve'ein zechlem, zechorim, zechorim, nekevis, eitzel nekevis. You're allowed to do that. And moisim be'em l'roishalan, and mesiyach d'nemoin, and moisim be'em l'zem, lam does lam l'chshidi. So you see from this brisa that a kusi is not suspicious. So why does the Gemara say that mokim shen loy nahagu limkoy? You're not allowed to sell to a kusi. What would be the reason? A kusi is different than a non-Jew. A kusi is not chashav.
But why can't you?
Oh, they are. Yeah, true. True. Huh?
How can we have like non-Jew teachers? Like,
How can we have non-Jewish
I
teachers?
won't go to school.
You're saying there's a brisa. You're not allowed to give over a tinoik. Lalamdo is safer. He's nodding his head. Gabe, you're liking this, no? Next year you're not gonna.
Money.
Okay. The kids want to know. The kids are still in school. Want to know? Maybe they don't have to go to English because
There's more than a few. There's a few
It says
kids in the class
teenage.
at the same time.
What about tutoring?
It says teenage. Baby, okay?
Maybe it's not
שבישיבה גדולה היה איזה
It doesn't say.
מורה
Yasipo.
גוי שהוא לא...
Okay, that's past this.
היה... הוא עדיין שם?
אני לא.
That's past this.
אתה יודע את זה? זה נכון? אז מה קרה?
Okay, it's not.
לא לשיעור?
That's mitzvah too.
מה בדיוק תורה? זה צריך לדעת.
Okay, afterwards. Oi Tanya.
That's
Oi Tanya. Nothing.
Continue.
Shmuley, good discussion to trigger over here, huh? Oi Tanya. Ein moichen lehen loy zayin. Veloy klei zayin. You're not allowed to sell any weapons to a non-Jew, right? Ve'im ashchizin lenas zayin. You don't sharpen it. Ve'im moichen lenas sadin. Ve'loy kolorin. Ve'loy kvolim. Ve'loy shashal shabarzel. Not handcuffs. Not chains. None of that stuff. You could sell them. Echad oivik chum. Ve'echad kusi. Even for a kusi. My time, or what's the reason? If you're going to have a kusim are chashid on killing, are they really chashid? You just told me in the previous brisa you can be alone with a kusi because they're not chashid shvichas damim. So why can't you sell weapons to a kusi? Because they might sell it to a guy, and a guy is certainly chashid shvichas damim. So you are leading this weapon to a guy. You're facilitating. You're feeling it's there.
אקוטי זה לפני עיוור.
Huh?
אקוטי זה לפני עיוור.
Why? Because they're gay.
אז אקוטי, הוא גרי הראיות, הוא לא יודע את ההלכה.
It says here, well, sometimes
הוא לא יודע את ההלכה. הוא לא יודע את ההלכה.
Injure Jews, yeah?
הוא לא יודע את ההלכה.
And what would be the problem? Problem with the Jew doing that? Oh, because they're injuring Jews. They don't want to.
אקוטי לא יודע את ההלכה, והוא ימכור את זה לגוי. הוא גרי הראיות.
Okay.
אז יש להם חזקה של כאילו גרים. אבל מכיוון שהוא אמר, הוא לא יודע את ההלכה, אז אם תמכור לו את זה, הוא ימכור את זה לגוי. אז זה לפני עיוור.
Aha.
Technically, you could say that you can't sell it to a Jew because he might sell it to a Kuti, so then he might sell it to.
But Yisrael knows that he's not allowed to sell it. Yisrael knows. But a kusi is like a ay Jew. He's like a ay. It's like a Gerei Rayas, like Abshol said.
depends on how much he's getting, then he'll sell it.
Yeah. All right, listen. Usually Jews are becheskes kashers. They're not going to do that. Okay, v'chi tema.
היום החילונים, מה זה? הם יותר גרוע מהקוטים.
Gemara says v'chi tema kusi lo avet tshuva Yisrael avet tshuva. Yeah, that's why you could sell it to a Yisrael that's chashud, but you can't sell it to a kusi. V'nachma Rav Ruah b'kedech she'amru aser limkol avik chavim. So too, you're not allowed to sell it to Yisrael that's suspicious of selling it to a guy. So anyway, B'kitzra Maisa, this was Abaya's taina on on Rabba. Right? So Rabba said, again, what did Rabba say? Rabba says that Rabba made a chilik.
Just a story about Rabbi.
What did Rabba say? What was the kasha? Oh, because Rabba sold a chamor to a yid that was chashad limker lo'evid kechavim. So Rabba said he might have sold it to a Jew. So here he said, so Abaya disproved that. Abaya says, no, it's...
You cannot...
Yeah, they weren't mechalik. If this Jew...
Exactly. You cannot not sell it to a yid to be choshed on him to sell it to a goy. There's not going to be an end to it.
Yeah, in other words, if a yid is choshed to sell it to a guy, he's just like a guy in that area, and therefore you're not allowed to sell it to that such a Jew.
But it's a problem.
So this is amazing, because like over here, what happened was, Rabba was Abaya's uncle, right? Rabba raised Abaya, right? And many times in the Gemara, Abaya asks on Rabba, and we had in the Gemara Bava Basra, we had, I think it was in, whatever, Samach Beis, in the Bava Basra we had where Abaya asked on Rabba, Rabba didn't even answer him, because Rabba said, Abaya's just wrong, I'm not even going to bother answering him, right? So very rarely do you have this case in our Gemara we have over here where Abaya asks on Rabba and really disproves Rabba. And Rabba's makabel. And Roed Basreit Losa Parsa, Rabba really realized he was wrong, and he started chasing the Jew that he sold it to 3 parsois to try to get it back. Because Abaya said to him that you weren't allowed to do that. So Rabba tried to get him. Vikdamer Parsa B'chala, that he ran 1 parsa in sand, which is really, really hard. If you try running in sand, right? It's really hard. Rabba ran that far, such a distance, even in sand, to try to get it back. And he couldn't reach him, and he was never able to get it back. But either way, you see that,
כן, אבל אני חושב שלהלכה, נמשיך ללמוד, אז זה, להלכה נפסק שאין לזה סוף. אתה לא יכול לא למכור ליהודי בהנחה שהוא או ימכור את זה לגוי. כי לא יהיה לזה סוף. Not going to be into it.
Now what? If you can't sell it to a Jew, who's going to sell it to a guy?
Yeah, because maybe this
Right.
Jew,
That's exactly.
there's no, you can't.
That's exactly it. Excellent. So the Gemara says, just like you're not allowed to sell to a guy, like you can't sell a weapon to a guy, you can't sell it to a Jew who's a listim, right? Who is going to, he's gonna rob other people. He's gonna use it. So just because he's a Jew, right? Just because he's a Jew doesn't mean that you could sell it to him if you know he has a reputation of using it in the wrong way. Asks the Gemara, if this Jew is killing, he has a reputation of killing pshita. Avad, it's pashut, you're not allowed to sell him a weapon. That's literally the same case of a guy. If he delay kotel, if not, amai loy. What's the problem? Anyway, he's not going to kill. So what? He robs, but he's not going to kill. So why can't you sell him a weapon? Because really doesn't kill. What he does
Why
is,
can't you sell him a weapon? Because he's going to steal. That's still
yeah, he steals without the weapon. He's not using the weapon to steal. The Gemara says it's true.
What do you
He's
mean?
not
Of course
using.
he's the weapon.
No, Gemara says if he's not using the weapon to steal, he doesn't threaten to kill anybody, he doesn't kill anybody, then why can't you sell it to him? Gemara says the truth is he doesn't use the weapon to kill. He just uses his hands to steal, and he doesn't threaten with a gun. The zimnan de ovid latzul nafshei. But sometimes he wants to save himself, I guess, after he steals and they want to take the money back. He's going to kill somebody, so that's when we say you're not allowed to sell it to him, even though initially he won't use the weapon. Taner Rabbanai Merchel Teresa, you can't sell them shields. The Yeshayim Merchel Teresa, you could sell them shields. My time, if the reason why you can't sell a shield to a guy is because they protect themselves, they protect of the kechavim. So you shouldn't be allowed to sell them any food either, because they're of the kechavim. So whatever they need to survive, whether it's a shield or whether it's food, you should never be able to sell them anything because they're of the kechavim. This Gemara says, Amarav efshar hachanami. If it's possible not to sell them anything, even food, then avada, we wouldn't be allowed to sell them even food. Problem is, that's impossible. Because why? Because they're going to hate us. We're going to exacerbate anti-Semitism. Right? The guy's going to say, Ava's hatred. They're going to hate us even more. I guess with weapons, why wouldn't there be Ava? Why are we afraid for Ava by weapons? I guess we are, but it's more important not to sell it to them, even if they hate us. But it's more important not to sell it to them.
Israel sells a weapon to all the world.
They do?
Israel to all the world.
Beepers.
The beepers. Yeah.
אפילו לאויבים שלנו, לקטר זה. הכל בכסף.
Wow.
הכל כסף.
Ikad the Amris, the Gemara says,
הכל כסף.
Ikad the Amri,
הכל כסף.
Ikad the Amri says the Gemara, Tris nine a time of the Lord. The reason why I'm not allowed to tell them shield, the chishlim zainayu, because when they're out of bullets on the battlefield, katla begavai, they use their shields to kill. So in other words, they use the shield as a weapon, and that's why shields are included in the Isser. Yesh omer moichelam trisim the chishlim zainayu me'erik arki. Yeah, and some say you are allowed to sell them the shields because once the bullets are gone, they're not going to use the shields. They're going to run, and therefore the shields are not pleizayin. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Baravua, halacha keyesh oimrim. The halacha is like the yesh oimrim that it's mutter to sell shields to goyim, the goyim. Okay, we'll stop over here, and Mitzvah Shem will continue tomorrow. Right.